Thank you, Tony, for making the time to gist with me today. I think I've been pursuing you since January, and it just makes me know that you are so busy, and I appreciate you much more now because you've actually taken the time and honored my request to even be interviewed at all. I know so many people might have asked you for an interview and you've been busy, or you said no, or you said yes to me. So I'm super glad and happy and filled with gratitude. So,
Well, thank
for
you.
the people listening that don't know who you are, let me just quickly introduce you. So, on the show with me today is the CEO and founder of a company called Iya Foods based in Chicago. She packages powders, flours, spices of African and I guess in Nigerian origin and sells it in retail stores all over America. She's also launched a snack or some snacks, a new range of snacks using superfoods that I am also super excited about, and she's doing incredibly great stuff. She was also featured in Forbes Next 1000, Essence magazine, to mention a few. She's managed to turn her business from a company turning over 50K to a multi-million dollar company in under 6 years. And she's in Nigeria, so I'm very proud. So, welcome, Tay. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you, Bumi. That was such a nice summary. I was like, okay, is it me she's talking about? That was such a nice summary. Thank you.
I hope I did you justice.
I think so. Most people, I think, including me, are not used to talking about themselves. So it's always interesting. Like, it's a bit tickling. Let me not say tickling. Yeah, to hear somebody else describe you to yourself. But that was good. Thank you.
You should be super proud. You should be super proud. You've done so well, and you are doing so well. I'm really proud. I'm really proud. So,
Thank you, Bumi.
my first question would be: I remember because we are in school together that you left Nigeria, I think in early 2000,
Yeah.
to migrate to the US. So I wanted to ask you: was it always your intention to start a business? Because I know you worked a bit in Nigeria before you left, but did you have it in mind to always start a business, or you worked a bit and then decided that you would start a business?
I think it just kind of a couple of things. It was a personal and at the same time career progression that just brought me to where I am today. And what I mean by personal is like many Nigerian families, especially being the first girl in the family. I'm the second born, but the first girl of five kids. Like many Nigerian families, I had to um, be like an assistant mom or by default an entrepreneur. So this the lifestyle I had is a lifestyle a lot of at least Nigerians in my generation had, which is whether or not your parents had a full-time job, they had a side business that you had to help with, or if you're the older one, you help with the siblings. So my mom had a small pharmacy, a chemist. We call it chemist, right? So I used to go to Agege, mushing with her to buy medicine because she's a nurse by training. So, and I used to go and open the store, clean the medicine, sell the medicine. She had a kerosene tank in front of the farm, it's front of the chemist. Then she had a small fast food store. Then she had this thing where she would buy chicks and then sell chicken during Christmas. At one point, she had goats. At one point, we had snail. At one point, we sold water. So that's why I'm explaining that it wasn't like by choice at the beginning. Like every other child, if you're selling water, who is going to be the one selling the water? It's me. So I was in front of the house selling the water. I was opening the fast food to bake donut, to bake egg rolls, to make meat pie. I was one who bake and sell. I was also opening the chemist when I had to open the chemist. So that was the early part of my life where entrepreneurship was just a permanent and normal and instinctive everyday activity for me growing up in Ikpaja in Nigeria. And then on top of that, my education, I studied accounting in at OAU. And then obviously my MBA at Kellogg, I worked in private equity in Nigeria. So between my education and even my initial job, and for those who don't, I know a lot of people know what private equity is, but for those who don't know what private equity is, it's people who invest in businesses, but not as loans, but they give the money and they're taking part ownership of that business. That's the simple definition, and there's a broad range of what private equity does, right? So I then went into private equity. So if you think about my background, just being like an assistant mom and an entrepreneur by default because of all the businesses my mom had, and if you think about my education in accounting and business, and then my career, everything just pointed towards just built up my personal affinity, my professional capabilities, my experience, everything just built up towards entrepreneurship. That's why I said it was a bit a mix of two things. A, it was how I grew up, and B, it was it was my education and my work. It was how that evolved as well.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So, starting a business on its own, even when you're in your home country, is a scary thing to do. Talk less of when you're an immigrant. So, what would occur to me first is, how do I start? Where do I get all the information? I don't want to break any law. I don't want the IRS chasing me. So, I don't know if you're aware, many Nigerians have left for other countries, America, UK, Canada, I know not every one of them wants to be in paid employment. I'm sure some of them would want to start businesses of their own. So how do you prepare to start a business, knowing that the environment, the culture, the laws are so different from where you're coming from? Where do you get information? Where did you start from?
Okay, so I'll answer this question differently today than I would have 10 years ago. And that's because what I mean by that is that, and I think this applies to a lot of entrepreneurs, is if you know what the journey is really gonna look like and what you'll have to the things you have to learn, unlearn, and do, probably most of us would never have started on this entrepreneurship journey. So the reality is there is the existing infrastructure and ecosystem in environments like America, Canada, and UK that make starting a business in some areas, I want to say, easier than Nigeria. Starting a business is never easy. So I'm hesitant to use the word easier, but there's some things that are easier. For example, you want to register a company in Illinois, you can go online and have a company registered in 5 minutes. You submit the application, they get back to you. You can expedite, you can have 2 days. So some things are easier if you're thinking of power, right? If what you're going to do requires electricity, you're not worried about generating your own power as you would in Nigeria. So that's what I mean, that some things are easier. The logistics, the transportation industry is more, obviously,
Yeah.
more advanced or more stable, let me put it that way, or more present is probably a better word. So there's some things that are easier, but you still have the difficult things, being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, which is proving the business model, growing your market share, getting customers, and all that stuff. And that sometimes can be easier or harder depending on the environment you're in. There are definitely additional layers of complexity and difficulty that comes from being an immigrant, comes from being a woman, comes from being a black woman, in America, where
Yeah.
race is such an important factor in terms of how people filter everyday life, filter opportunities in both a positive and a negative way. So those are things you have to navigate as you're going through a business. But going back to your question, which is, and correct me if I'm wrong in terms of rephrasing that question, in the way I understand it, is how easy or difficult was it for to start a business in a different environment as an immigrant?
and
It was.
also and
Go
and
ahead.
also and also to ask, where does one start from, as in what guides you? I know you went to Kellogg's. Did you go to Kellogg's before you started the business to guide you into what to do within America, or you had already started your business and then you went to Kellogg's before because you thought you needed a formal education to help you, to guide you through the path?
Was one of the things I was thinking about when I applied to Kellogg. I actually even wrote about it in my essays, that I want to be an entrepreneur and the things I was going to do as an entrepreneur and all of that stuff. But one of the first things I learned when I started business is business will humble you very quickly. You learn a lot of stuff in school, whether it's masters, all of that stuff. You learn a lot of stuff, but when you get into the real world, it's not every time that those things are applicable.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
the most successful people in business aren't necessarily those that went to business school, right? So
Yeah.
you learn a lot, and it's very humbling. There are things that you learn. For me, one of the key things, and I want to summarize that about Kellogg. If you ask me today, one of the key benefits of going to a Kellogg is the network, the alumni network, which definitely makes making business connections a lot more efficient. So if I needed to meet someone in a company where if I hadn't gone to Kellogg, I wouldn't have access, There are companies I have access to, the people I have access to because of Kellogg, because they are the alumni network of Kellogg. So that has been, I would say, my number one benefit of going to Kellogg. And of course, learning, the academic learning obviously helps. The more you know, obviously, the better you make decisions, obviously, in terms of how you process data, how you feed data into the decision making process. So all of those things help. But there's still a learning curve when it comes to the industry you're going into. So Kellogg helped. When I jumped into entrepreneurship, Iya Foods, which is the company I run today, is my fourth business in America. The very first one, had spectacular failure. I closed that business within 6 months in
Was
debt.
it was it was it true vines or true
No, True
branches?
Branches. That was my
True
second
branches.
business. My
Okay.
first business I called Land 303. And 303 was, I think, at the time, was probably still is the kilometer of Africa. So I was trying to maintain some kind of connection to Africa. What I would do is I would go import paintings. And I don't know if you can see some, even the one at the back of the one in this. I'm going to go back. This is one of the
Yeah,
paintings in
I
my
can
first
see it.
business. So I was going to artists, I was getting paintings, I was getting cabinets, any artwork that could be home decor. And I opened kind of like a home decor business. But I opened the business about 2 months. The doors opened about 2 months before the 2008 recession in America.
Oh,
People were not buying luxury paintings or luxury cabinets or luxury woodwork. That was number one. Number two, there was a lot I didn't understand about that industry. So I closed that business within 6 months before I then started True Branches. On True Branches, I would consolidate containers, diapers, cars, clothing, furniture, shoes, whatever it is. I would consolidate it from America, and then I was supplying stores in Nigeria. I was supplying Ebano. I was supplying people in a hotel. I was supplying boutiques. I did that business for 8 years. Successful, very successful. That was before Konga, before Jumia. Very, very successful. But there was a very, very difficult part of the business, exchange rates. So
wow,
what would
yeah.
happen over 6 to 8 years that I ran the business is, if let me pick Huggies diapers for example. Huggies might be $40. It might increase to $40.50. That doesn't seem like a significant increase when you're talking about the dollar. But if the naira has gone from 160 to
To 300.
350, then your cost has doubled by
Yeah.
default, because you are generating cost in dollar but selling in naira. That wasn't a sustainable business. And I'm glad, I mean, look at dollar today. I'm glad I ended that business. I don't know how people, I don't know those that are still in it, I don't know how they're doing it. Obviously, they're transferring their cost to
To the
customers, but
customer.
I just
Mm.
made that determination that I didn't want to do that anymore, because there's a finite in Nigeria today. There's a finite, almost a finite range of what people can afford. I'm talking about
Yeah.
mainstream Nigerians. I wasn't going to run a business where my cost could double within 2 months with zero control over that. So that's why I ended that business. So that was my second business. My third business was it wasn't meant to be a permanent business. I had ended the second one. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I'm somebody who likes to be busy, and I thought, let me find something to keep myself busy while I'm figuring out what my next path is going to be. So I started a consulting business where I was consulting with US companies that wanted to do business in Africa, because I had grown up in Africa. I had done one, two businesses doing business in Africa. So I knew I had a unique set of knowledge and expertise in how to do business in Nigeria and business in America. So I was doing that for 2 years before I then started Iya Foods. It just gave me time to take a step back while I kept my hands busy a little bit, and take a step back and say, what am I doing next, before I then started Iya Foods. And Iya Foods obviously has been the most successful of all my entrepreneurship endeavors. It's been the most exciting, it's been the most rewarding, it's also been the most challenging as well. So it's everything, it's on the extreme of everything: challenging, exciting, rewarding, profitable. It's been on all of those ends. And that's what you do as an entrepreneur, you balance those things. But yeah, but that's been the journey. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of things I thought were going to be easier, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're going into these things with a with a mind that, you know, you're excited, you're optimistic. Entrepreneurs are optimistic. And then you realize that, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. So it's been definitely a learning curve. And of course, I've gotten better at it every year because anything you're dedicating over a decade to, you can get better at it increasingly.
Okay. So in hindsight, would you say if you were starting all over again, you would go to a business school first, or where do you recommend that a person starting a business in America should go to first for at least the basics?
Um, I'm not. I don't have, and this is an honest opinion. I don't have an opinion one way or the other about business school. So if you told me, for example, you wanted to start, because the world has evolved, the world has changed, right? I went to Kellogg, which is the number one marketing school in the world. But marketing into 2022 includes social media. And there are people who don't have a single day of even college experience that are doing,
So
that
well,
understand social media better than, that are better than most people, and they're killing it on social media. So I do think the world has evolved in a different way. So if you told me, for example, you wanted a career in consulting and those specific industries you wanted a career in, I can see I can give very objective advice and say, you know what, business school is a great path towards that. I'm not saying business school is not a great path towards entrepreneurship. It is a great path. And a lot of business schools, I graduated business school in 2006. A lot of business schools have added entrepreneurship classes that involve real life case studies that are incredibly beneficial to getting the best knowledge you can get, at least academically, about entrepreneurship. So it really depends. I feel people have to make that decision themselves. And I think it also differs by business school, right? Because some business schools have stronger entrepreneurship or marketing curriculums than others. So I think that's a very personal decision that people have to make. The way I like to make these decisions is I call it triangulation. I triangulate everything. So if you want to go into business, I wouldn't look at business school from one point of view. I would look at least three things that you say, okay, this is what I want to do. What are the three things that are going to give me the best starting point? So for example, if you're going into solar, right? Is business school going to help you with solar? Is there an accelerator you can join that is going to help you with solar? What are the things you need to do to help you with solar? Are you going to energy trade shows? You know, there are a bunch of things that you need to do where if you have, especially if you have a finite amount of resources that you want to spend, you have to think about the best way to spend those things. And I, as a rule of thumb in my life, my personal life, my business life, I try my best to get three data points to feed into things
yeah,
in making a decision. And that's what I would advise people to do. Business school can be one of those data points, but what else? You know, what else? Are you in an industry that needs a lot of connections, right? So, for example, if you're going into PR, if you're, I don't know anything about PR, I'm not a PR person, or if you're going into creating content, if you're going into, you want to open a grocery store, you want to open you're a dentist, you want to open your own practice, there's so many things you can think about, right? I say always try to get at least three very strong data points so that you're making the best decision you can make. I want to add one more point. I do the same thing for myself. I tell my kids the same thing. I said, in any decision you're trying to make, right? Whether it's entrepreneurship, you do not need to be 100% sure. You only need to be 51% sure because you need to give yourself some grace. You nobody is ever always 100% sure 100% of the time, right?
yeah,
Even in personal relationships, even when you're deciding who you're going to marry, right? There's nobody that's 100% sure all of the time in anything.
yeah,
You've got to give yourself room to evolve and redirect and pivot if need be. The best thing is just try your best to get as many data points as you can and make the best decision you can make at that point in time. Your decision might evolve based on new information or based on how the industry is evolving. For example, the decisions I made about branding and marketing in 2008 obviously will be very different in 2022 with the way things have
yeah.
evolved in social media. So there are definitely things that are constantly evolving and we have to evolve as well.
Right, right. That's very insightful. So I love that you're in the food industry because if we go back to economics. They say food, shelter, clothing are man's basic needs. So if you were to do anything within that line, you would do well, or there's a market for it, But you're specific to superfoods, So I wanted to find out why did you pick superfoods? Why did you pick? What was the timing? Was it that it was in trend then, and you thought that you might have a head start if you picked that specific sector? What made you go into that?
This is also my favorite questions to talk about. It was a bunch of things, three things. So there was the food aspect of it, right? Because my kids, they talk about NFT, they talk about crypto, all these things, that they talk about technology, all of that. So I tell them, you are your tech bros. You can do your technology, but at the end of the day, you still have to eat. All of you have to eat. So food will always sell. Food will always sell. So that
Yeah,
was one of the business decisions. Besides the fact that I love food, I really have my own personal capabilities are very strong in food R&D, in innovation, in spotting trends. That's why I mentioned my background in private equity, in consulting. I actually worked at one of the top of the best consulting firms in the world, Bain and Company. Loved my experience there. All of those things built a very innate skill in me, in able to process data and spot where things are likely to move, the direction in where things are likely
super.
to move. So I was able to take that and leverage it within the foods, particularly in the CPG industry. Because if you think about food as a value chain and as ecosystem, there's so many roles you can play in there. So for me, particularly in the CPG industry, there was definitely an opportunity there, and I could leverage that data. So number one, food as a business, I knew was never going to go away, because no matter who
Yeah,
you are, president
you eat.
to janitor, you have to eat. Tech bro, doctor, uh, whoever you are, you have to eat. So that was, I knew
Yeah,
food was a good business. Okay. Then there was the branding and marketing, and say there's so much money being spent in marketing. CPG is war. And for those who don't know what CPG is, it's consumer packaged goods. So if you're buying
yeah,
something in a grocery store, you're using something every day, it's a consumer packaged good. And that cuts across not just food, it cuts across multiple aspects, right? It's war in that industry, because people are spending millions of dollars on advertising, on capabilities, on there are companies that have millions of dollars for their employee budgets. There are companies that have millions of dollars to automate their processes. There are companies that have millions of dollars to buy materials and raw ingredients way cheaper than startups can, or somebody just going into the business for the
yeah,
first time can. So have to you have to find a way to differentiate yourself. I call it
yeah,
your personal legend. Everybody has one. Businesses have one. And for me, as an African immigrant, saying African ingredients as superfoods was a quick way that we could differentiate ourselves in the market, that could get consumers excited, that could get customers excited to try our products for the first time. Because when you're a CPG good, you want somebody to try your product for the first time, and then because they love it, because it's affordable, because it's functional in their lives, then they become repeat buyers. Then they become, by default, ambassadors telling people about your product. So, from a branding perspective, it was also a good decision. Number three, as an African immigrant, and this story is well known, is well documented, we all know it, how a lot of our resources, um, there's value created in industries, it supports industries. Well, we don't get credit for it, and not only that, we don't retain value. Um,
yeah,
one of the first brutal lessons I learned in entrepreneurship, I think in the world in general, especially in a capitalist society, I think in the world in general, to be honest, regardless of whether or not it's capitalist, is not the country, the person, the entrepreneur, the business that creates value, that retains value. It's whoever retains value that retains value. And I explain what I mean by that using an example. What we call cocoa in Nigeria, here they'll say cacao, right? Cacao, cocoa is the same thing. There are four countries, and I call them the Sing countries, CING, that produce 70% of the world's cacao, or cocoa as we call it: Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Ghana. But when you go to the communities that actually grow the cocoa, they are significantly still poor. I saw an article that said 80% of cocoa farmers in the four African countries I just mentioned have never tasted chocolate. Think about that for a
that's an
second.
irony.
Think about the billions of dollars created in the chocolate industry. And the four African countries that supply close to 70% of the main ingredients are still incredibly poor communities. And cannot even afford chocolate or have tasted chocolate. So when you look at it in terms of value created, we cannot deny the value these farmers, these communities, these African countries create when it comes specifically to chocolate, to cocoa, to cacao. But are they retaining that value? Is there a fair share in that value? That's why when I founded Iya Foods, one of the values I wrote into the DNA of the company is something we call shared prosperity and integrity of purpose. For all the prosperity and the value being created, are we sharing it in a way that is fair? And why is that relevant to Iya Foods as an American company, but also a company that is very deeply Nigerian as well? Is I have started to see a lot of African superfoods trend in America. Tiger nuts, which is grown in Nigeria and Niger Republic, hibiscus, cassava, one of the fastest growing ingredients for gluten-free, grain-free baking, snacking applications, a replacement for wheat flour. I started to see all of those things trend in America, hibiscus. So I asked myself, 10 years from now, are we going to be in the same situation as we're in with cacao, where these ingredients that are grown mostly in Africa have created billions of dollars in the food industry, but those communities that grew those things and have grown them for centuries and decades and for forever are not having a fair share of that value that is being created. That's why for us as an immigrant, Nigerian American, Illinois based food company, it was important to, from the way we were branding African ingredients and superfoods, to own that narrative and own that space so that we're able to retain a fair portion of the value that is created. That's why I like to answer that question, because it wasn't just from from a business strategy point of view. It was also from just an immigrant or Nigerian pride point of view. Is I want my people, I want my community in Nigeria, because now I have two communities, right? I want Nigeria to benefit from the value created from the things that we're growing and the things that we're using to feed the world and the value that we're creating in the world. And I knew that being a key player and an evolving player in that space was going to be important towards making sure that we're retaining some of the value that we're creating.
So does that mean that your raw materials are imported from Nigeria? Because I'm assuming that there's some of them that you can actually grow in Illinois.
So that's a good question. So we do a, because we're an American company, but we're also a heavy Nigerian influence company. We do have a, I want to say, a balance in that strategy, right? So it's not 0 to 100. It's not like 100 of our stuff comes from Nigeria or zero of our stuff comes from Nigeria. The things we know that has the power to reform communities economically, we do put in a lot of effort into developing that supply chain ecosystem within Nigeria. For example, cassava. Cassava has the power to transform Nigeria's economic, to transform, has a lot of power to add to the transformation of Nigeria economically. And so we are heavily involved in developing that ecosystem. Hibiscus is another, tiger nut is another. And then that is why we do a lot of innovation. For example, very few people know, but we're going to make that announcement on our social media very soon. One of the products we use in our new snacking line called chippers, and chippers is like your chips that you eat and you crunch and it's really nice, is a goosey.
Yeah.
Is a goosey.
Wow. You know, I was
Goosey is
curious about it
nice.
because I saw your posts,
Yeah.
and but you didn't tell us what they were made of, and I was curious. I was like, oh, what did you make
We're
this
going to be
from?
unveiling it more and more. We use egusi. Now, egusi is a very protein rich, delicious melon seed. Melon seeds and plant based seeds are growing like crazy in America. So, part of our immigrant pride is to begin to develop the innovation around egusi. So not only is egusi now useful locally in Nigeria, we can create export opportunities, revenue and dollar generating, revenue generating opportunities for Nigerian African superfoods that we know have a global application. There's so many things we eat to consume in Africa that have a global application, where we're able to grow those things to serve the local needs, but then it creates additional market. And what does that do for us as a community? Extra jobs, right? extra
Yeah.
many more markets. So it grows that ecosystem by default because there's now more of a great there's now more demand, and that demand will fuel investments in those specific ecosystems or supply chain, and then we can hire more people, then we can earn dollars, and before you know it, you're creating millionaires out of things that we weren't even thinking about before. And a good example is egusi. I do believe egusi has a global application. It's a delicious, healthy ingredient, very high in protein, plant-based protein. But people aren't really thinking of egusi in terms of the global applications of being a plant-based protein. That's my job to do because of the exposure we have to multiple environments where we say, I love egusi soup. I have it in my fridge right now. I'm going to eat it with
It's my
swallow.
favorite too.
It's my favorite. So I enjoy my goosey like an everyday Nigeria. That's never gonna go away. But what are the other global opportunities we can generate for a goosey? More importantly, how we're ensuring that the value we create on a global scale, Nigeria is retaining some of that value so that we create entire communities that that entire community can actually make a living, a really good living off of a goosey alone, off of tiger nuts, off of hibiscus, off of cassava, off of so many of the amazing things that we do. And we do have a full list of ingredients that we're working with that we believe that if the applications of those ingredients can be extended using R&D, using innovative food product development, that we can actually empower communities to multiply significantly the revenue, the food revenue that those communities are generating.
So what's your value proposition? Is it that you offer African or Nigerian food from Nigeria or African origin, or that your foods are superfoods and they're super nutritional, or is it that the calories in them are less, so they are healthier for you, or they won't make you fat? You know or is it all of these things that I mentioned?
So that's a very good thing because something that has evolved over time, and we landed on a simple description and definition of what we do, and that is we make good food made from good ingredients. Because at the end of the day, all of these things come up: keto, um, oil, protein, this, low carbs. All of these things come and they go. The bottom
Yeah.
line for most human beings is that you just want to eat good food that nourishes your body and is the best for your body, regardless of what new food craze or weight loss craze comes in. That is when you narrow it down, people just want to enjoy their food and they want it to be good for their bodies so that their bodies are the best that they can be. True or false?
Yeah.
So that's why we
Absolutely.
say we make good food made with good ingredients. The I like to describe it as a flexitarian approach. Flexitarian in America, more people understand it to be going from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. What I think flexitarian is a bigger umbrella is people are flexible in what they would eat as long as they
Yeah.
know it's good for them. So is it a particular type of fruit-based food? If it's good for me and it's healthy, it's not going to make me sick, it's not going to make me gain unnecessary weight, but it's just the right amount of nutritional. Because if you look at nutrition, right, your body needs a certain amount of calories a day. But within those calories, if you break it up to macronutrients, your body needs protein, it needs carbs, it needs vitamins. The body needs a wide variety of macronutrients and things. So as long as people know it's giving them those things at the right amount on a daily basis, most people are happy with it. So is it coming from, are you making something from fruit that fulfills that need? Are you making something from vegetables that fulfills that need? Are you making a snack like we have a baking mixes that fulfills that need? So that's why we have a more, I want to say, stripped down, mother-like, Iya Foods is mother, right? Mother-like approach to how we're feeding people is it'll be delicious, but it'll be nourishing at the same time. So we don't attach ourselves. Every other thing like gluten free, low in sugar, low in calorie, all of those things are just nice to have. Our number one focus is give people clean food made with good ingredients. And that's why we use the word good food, the phrase good food, good ingredients, because when you now start breaking down what does good really mean, right? You can say it's
Yeah.
tasty. You can say it's clean. You can say it's free of harmful chemicals. You can say it's just the right amount of what people need, the right serving of what people need. So good is good. So that's how we define it, as opposed to attaching ourselves to um, a seasonal diet fad. We don't do that. Yeah.
Okay. I bought one on Amazon. I told you because I
Ah,
thought to myself that how could I interview you without buying one or trying it out? And I was happy about it because for me, I cook trial and error. As
yeah.
in, my jollof rice can taste nice today, and by tomorrow, if I try it again, it might not be as nice. As in, the consistency is not there. But with this, you can have the same taste every single time you make it because the ingredients are all there, and you're doing not much but to add stock and put the rice in, and so it's fantastic, and the packaging is great. So I wanted to ask you. I noticed that you changed the packaging at some point in time. I I asked this question to some other entrepreneur as well, and in Nigeria, her own reasons for changing was different. She wanted it to be of international standard because she was going into export. She makes Greek yogurt, but then again, she also said that people were imitating her packaging, so she needed to make it a little bit more unique and include some things that make it peculiar to her. But I don't know if those kind of things happen in America or there's some other reason why you needed to change your packaging.
That's a great example of what I was referring to earlier when I said some things are easier in America and some things obviously are harder. So, for
Yeah,
example, that to be counterfeiting somebody else's packaging is illegal. If you did that in America, you'd be caught. You and you would and you
yeah,
would and you would bear the consequences of that. In Nigeria, it's a lot
mm,
harder. It's a lot harder
yeah,
to follow through that process. You catch the first person, they do it again, or how are you even going to catch the person? So it's a lot harder. So
yeah,
those are one of the things a lot of people I know that have successful brands have to deal with in Nigeria. Not just even Nigerians. You have international organizations where people are manufacturing their exact packaging and counterfeiting the content within the packaging. So it's definitely a problem in Nigeria. But for us, that wasn't the reason why. That wasn't the main reason. It wasn't even, I don't think, one of the reasons at all of why we evolved in our packaging. Our packaging evolved as we gained stronger, better understanding of our customers. Because here there's intense competition. Remember when I said CPG is war and CPG is consumer
yeah,
packaged goods? The way it works, you have less than 3 seconds, Bumi, on an aisle to capture a customer's
your
attention.
market. Yeah,
So if you have less than 3 seconds, what does that mean? Your packaging becomes one of the top, if not the number one, most important thing when you're on a shelf. And by shelf, I mean retail brick and mortar, because obviously we sell online, and online you do have more tools to show what it is you have. You can show video, you can show recipes, you can show the inside of the packaging. But when you're in a
yeah,
physical retail store, you don't have any of that, right? Is your packaging. So
yeah.
our packaging has evolved based on the understanding of the consumers that is likely to pick up our goods to make sure that we're adequately communicating with that consumer. And for us, that means something that was one of the most challenging things we've ever done. I'll tell you why. If a Bumi is walking down an aisle in California, for example, or New York, or wherever, Tennessee, Iowa, and sees jollof rice seasoning, you immediately know what that is.
Yeah.
But you have somebody who doesn't know what jollof rice is. How do we communicate in 3 seconds or less what that is in a way that is distinctive to the average American consumer? And that's a challenge. Because outside of having Nigerian Americans, which obviously they support us a lot, which I'm very grateful for,
Yeah.
we wanted to be able to connect with the consumer who lives in Iowa or the consumer who lives in California. And if you live in America, you know that somebody in Iowa, in terms of how they think about their food, might be very different from somebody in New Orleans. Might be very different for somebody in New York. Might be very different for somebody who's 25 and somebody who's 50. Somebody who loves to cook, somebody who doesn't love to cook, somebody who eats rice, or somebody who wants to do quinoa. We had to now take all of these different things and come up with one packaging. Think about that, one packaging to serve all of these customers. That's why
Wow.
you've seen an evolution in our packaging, where we're trying to do a better job of being able to communicate with these different customers in 3 seconds or less. I would say the packaging you have right now is one of our best and our strongest commitment to staying on one on one branding perspective, with a few tweaks here and there, obviously, as we go along. But it was definitely one of our most evolved, I would say, aspects of the business. One of the most expensive, because packaging mistakes are very expensive. One of the most expensive and challenging aspects. But I'm so proud of the team and how far we've come in how our packaging has evolved. But as to summarize, our considerations for and reasons for changing packaging is very obviously very different from the amazing lady you just described who does business in Nigeria.
You know, it's interesting that you said the packaging is expensive because that was going to lead me to my next question. I have a friend who packages Gary,
Mm,
you know, but the packaging itself is done from China. And
mm,
because of the exchange rate problem, it ends up being one of his most expensive inputs.
yeah.
So I wanted to ask you if your packaging is done in America, if the costs are high because you are doing it in America or abroad, or if it's the research that went into getting out the finished product that made the packaging expensive.
Both. But and those are some of the things that makes America easier. For example, America has an R&D tax credit that has been very useful for my business. I don't know if Nigeria has something like that. I'm not saying it doesn't. I don't know. But in America, your tax and R&D credit is literally a direct credit to your taxes. So, for example, after the calculation
Yeah,
is done, if the allowable tax credit say comes to $5,000, if your taxes are $5,000, they will reduce those taxes by that amount. That's a quick and dirty explanation of it. So that definitely helps. But you do generate cost in your R&D, because R&D is not just on the ingredient, it's not just on the flavor, it's also packaging, and
yeah,
you're looking at packaging in an evolved world. And what I mean an evolved world is what packaging gives you the best flexibility for online sales. So, for example, if you
right,
do some stuff in plastic jars and glass, it's more difficult to ship. If you do it in a pouch, you can put it in an envelope. If you're doing a wet product or you're doing a dry product, your shipping considerations and logistics cost is different. So there's all of that research that goes into R&D, that goes into packaging, I meant to say. But also, packaging itself is expensive. There are times we do packaging and we change the packaging and all of that is a waste. Or we do packaging and there's a mistake. Even though we have three levels of packaging approval, there's a mistake and then you have to scrap all of that. So having said that, packaging, I think, especially when you're an emerging brand or a starting business, packaging will always be, no matter what you do, quite an expensive part of what
expensive.
you do, because those are things outside of our control. So if you're doing uh, plastic, if you're doing pouches, you don't own those companies. They will change the pricing regardless of what you do.
Yeah,
So that's part of it that is outside of your control. You just have to do the best you can to see the best way to reduce your cost. So it is an expensive thing, regardless of how you do it. I do encourage we generate most of our packaging costs locally, because technology has evolved in terms of how companies are able to print. A lot of the equipment is automated and digital in nature. I would encourage people to print locally as much as they can. But I do understand that in Nigeria, sometimes it's actually cheaper to print internationally. So everybody has
yeah.
to look at their environment and decide what's best for their company. But for us, it is better to print locally, and just do our best to plan flexibility into the packaging based on the customer we're trying to reach, based on the way we're trying to reach the customer, and based on our own numbers, or cost of goods sold for each SKU that we have.
Okay, fantastic. So I wanted to ask you. So after investing so much in the packaging, did you notice significant growth in your revenues
Oh my
as a
God,
result of it?
yes. I have one example. When we started selling cassava flour, there was a particular month where I think we sold one or two packages, and I was like, our competitors who don't even know cassava have, because I grew up with cassava. Like, I know cassava well. Like, it's cassava is a BFF. I'm like, how are these people who don't understand cassava, how are they selling significantly more? It was one of the most brutal, most expensive lessons I learned about packaging. It was our packaging. The day we introduced that new packaging, I believe that day we sold over 300 units. The content was
Wow,
the same. It was the packaging that changed. So I would
wow,
say to people, packaging is incredibly, we live in a very visual world now. World was visual before, now is even more visual. And the first way you reach people when it comes to visual is your packaging, whether it's a brick and mortar store or it's online, is your packaging. Having said that, I don't believe you take a kind of like one track approach to packaging, and I'll tell you what I mean. There are times I go to a natural food store like a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods, for example. For those who don't know what those stores are, those are stores that sell organic and that sell, very, very nutritious, clean labels. Clean labels means not any of the chemicals or things that are harmful to you. A lot of these stores will use very simple, basic packaging like craft paper. And it's very powerful from a packaging perspective because sometimes you don't want to over how I put it, over plasticize, if that's a word, your packaging, because it might come across as cheap, it might come across as commercialized, it might come across as all those big companies that just find the cheapest way to make something. Sometimes you do want to come across their packaging that has been successful because they look like grandma packed it in the kitchen with her hands, and that is a
Yeah.
powerful thing. So that's what I mean by when I say packaging. People usually, I think I mean just go and make your packaging as sexy or as modern looking as you can. And I don't think that's the right approach. I think if you start every decision, whether it's product innovation, whether it's packaging innovation, I feel like if you start every decision from a customer point of view, you will usually make the right decision or evolve the right way. Is what is the best kind of packaging for the customer that I'm trying to attract? So, for example,
Wow.
if you're a politician and you want to get elected, you know there's a certain way in the world we live in today, but telling the truth about the world we live in today, there's a certain way you might have to present yourself, right? But
Yeah.
if you're somebody who's selling skincare, then maybe you can go online with a bikini and show the beauty of your skin and the effect your skincare products are having on your skin, right? If you're a painter or an artist, if people see you in a bohemian type way, sometimes it makes the artist think that feel quite authentic. And that's why I say triangulate. I'm not saying these are the only things you need to look at, but if you put your customer as the most important factor in when you're making a decision, it would usually guide you in the right way because your customer is the most important thing when you're selling.
Right.
Whatever it is you're selling.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. I want to diverse a bit and take you back to your first sell or your first what should I say pitch. I don't know if Walmart was the first store you got into, but I'd like to know how you started, how you were able to penetrate that market, the retail space. Did you start small? Did you start with local stores, or you went for the big guns from the onset? How did you start? What was the pivotal moment for Iya Foods?
That's a very interesting question because when I first of all started being an entrepreneur, being a Christian, and I say Christian because there's faith and purpose that is so important to me and drives a lot of what I do. Entrepreneurs by default are very optimistic because you see a problem, you come up with a solution, and you believe that solution is going to work. Now layer on top of that a faith-based Christian approach to life that I have. So I just went for it, Bumi, to be honest. That was it. Say, dear God, you control the earth and the heavens. Please grant me favor. Please give me wisdom. And then as an entrepreneur, I worked as hard as I could to give the best that I could, using all of my knowledge, using everything, using competitive analysis, industry analysis, customer analysis to give the best that I could. I believe as a Christian that entrepreneurship success is a collaborative thing. So if you think about the story of the widow, I like to think about that in Elijah. I think I've forgotten which part of the Bible, right? And in the Bible it says the prophet asked her, "What do you have in your hands?" And she said, "Oil." And then in the Bible, the story talks about how she was able to generate a lot of oil miraculously and sell it and pay her debt and start her business. I believe entrepreneurship as a Christian is very much like that, which is you have to take what is in your hand first and do your part, and then
Yeah.
pray to God to bless it. That is the best way I can describe my approach to acquiring more doors. In our industry, we call it doors. How many doors are you in? How many doors is that SKU in? And of course, we sell online. But that has been my approach. I do the best I can. My team does the best they humanly can. And then we move that even further. We move that even further and be efficient, be diligent, be great at our own job. And then I just pray. Now, God, I'm going to present to Walmart, give me favor. I'm going to present to Whole Foods, give me favor. Sometimes we get a yes, and sometimes we get a no. And that's where my faith as a Christian comes in. I take the no. I'm disappointed, obviously, but I still choose to trust God. That if I believe this is my purpose in life, which I do with every fiber of my being, then I've got to trust God. That even when it's not going my way, that there's a larger purpose that is going to be bigger, and everything I know is possible will be achieved. So that's the best way I can answer that question is I just go for it regardless of what it is. There's no fear. There's fear. There is fear. Don't let me say there's no fear. There's fear, but the fear has become a companion. I hold fear by the hand and I say, let's go.
So you do it afraid anyway.
I do it afraid. I do it afraid. I move afraid. I There's actually a book called Do It Afraid, I think, by
Yes,
Joseph
yes.
Clare that I just bought. I haven't started reading it. So I'm gonna try to start reading it this weekend. But I tell people that fear has become one of my friends because it's there constantly. And I'm like, I still have to function, I still have to move with this fear. So I hold it by the hand and I say, let's go. We're gonna do this together. So that's where fear, that's why I say I won't say there's no fear. It's because at the end of the day you do have fear because you don't need courage if there's no fear. And everybody needs courage. So if there's anybody, for those watching this, please know you're gonna feel fear. Please know that you're gonna feel like, do I even know what I'm doing? Am I making the right decisions? Those things are normal. The best you can do is be efficient, plug in data, be hardworking, and just go for it. And understand that failure sometimes is a part of the process. It's easier said than done. People say that a lot. People who say that a lot, but the reality is it is a really crappy, intensely mentally damaging process to go through fear and to go through failure. But being an part of being an entrepreneur is just getting through that to the wins and to the successes. But that's how I do it. But me going back to your question, I just go for it. I determine it and I go for it. And I get a lot of yeses and I get a lot of nos. And I keep pushing.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. There's something else I wanted to ask you. Okay. So I know you sell in the retail stores, you sell online, you're on Amazon, you sell on your own website as well. So where do you experience the most volumes? And is it do the volumes the places that the channels that give you the most volumes, do they also give you the widest margins?
That's a good question. I think in the CPG industry, usually high volume usually would mean lower margins.
Yeah.
Typically, when you're doing very large volumes, your margins are typically lower because a lot of times you're pouring everything you can pour strategically into gaining market share. And that means sometimes you're pricing competitively. That and pricing competitively sometimes means you're lowering your pricing and all of that stuff. You're doing promotions, you're doing ads, you're doing all of that stuff. So as long as you're profitable, but the CPG industry tends to be a low margin business, tends to be. There's a wide range of that. And why I say tends to be is on some products, obviously we make more money on some products per unit than some other products. And but the other products where the margins are lower might sometimes a lot of times are higher volume items. Now going back to the sales channel, it differs. Digital sales channel, brick and mortar, which is physical stores. We do a lot of bulk. There are many ways we make. There's several ways we make money in Iya Foods, and that's where my hustler, Naija, Yoruba girl, Ipaja girl, chops comes in is Onoko Waja. How are we? Okay, we have these Iya Foods capabilities. Where are the many ways you can make money? And then we go for it. So there are multiple ways, obviously, that we generate cash. Because as a business, my undergrad is accounting. No matter what business you're doing, if you don't generate cash, you fail. Um, so it's not a straight answer because it really varies by channel. It also varies by SKU. So it's a varied item, and that's where taking a very strategic view of doing what is called a SKU rationalization. For those who don't know what that means, it means after a certain period of time, you then start to look at each SKU on a very granular level. You start to look at each sales channel on a granular level to say which ones are making money, which ones have more opportunity, and then you make SKU efficiency decisions based on that. So it isn't a one answer. Is the bottom line. There are many things that feed into
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So, which one of your products is your bestseller? Which one gives you the most in terms of revenues?
What we've
What's your
seen is
hero?
that has evolved over time. Obviously, our baking mixes, our flours were at top selling. But with the snacks that we're introducing, we're anticipating that the snacks will be our top seller because it's a grab and go, not too expensive item. So that has evolved as we've grown to see where the opportunities are in the market. And that's why my answers are usually varied because that's just the very nature of, I think, entrepreneurship and especially the very nature of CPG. Is things vary by SKU, things vary by channel, sales channel, things actually vary by category. And what do I mean by category? Baking flour is one category. We have pancake mixes, that's a breakfast category. We have flowers, that's a category. On top of that, there's gluten-free category. On top of that, there the sales channels. On top of that, there's subcategories. All of those things filter in into deciding, okay, this is one is the bestseller, that one is the bestseller. So it's not really one answer. It's a very detailed SKU strategy process. And for us, that has changed depending on the marketing, the branding, and the capabilities, the ingredient supply, the innovation that changes on a year to year. And it's going to change next year with our snacks introduction.
Okay. So, I wanted to ask you about your strategy. There's a strategy that I don't know if this is one of your strategies, but you could decide on um, staying within the skills that you have, but ensuring that you keep on progressing the number of stores or the number of channels that you can sell through, or you could decide to keep on innovating more and more skills to increase your revenues. So, do you do both, or one or the other, or one at a time? You know.
That's actually part of what a SKU rationalization means. And it's not just me. Obviously, as we've grown and as revenue has grown and as our resources have grown, the team has grown. So I do have a very capable team in the sales, retail, brick and mortar industry that looks at that on a very granular level. And we look at it from a bulk level. We look at it from all the different ways that we make money as a business. So, but that is always an ongoing process. I mean, if you are subscribed to the CPG food industry, you see even large companies like PepsiCo, Mondelez, Conagra, you see announcements like, oh, this person selling their cheese business. And you wonder because the brand we all know, they've had that business for 30 years, but they decided to sell it. Or this company selling their beverage business. So even the big companies that are multi-billion dollar companies, you see them do that SKU rationalization, category rationalization, products rationalization, innovation. You see them constantly evolving. It's just something you have to keep doing in a balanced way. So you're not just constantly being pulled in different directions, but you are truly making the best decision as your customer data is evolving and as your capabilities are getting stronger. So we are constantly doing that. And that's one of the reasons why we're introducing snacks, right? Because we realized that we had a very strong innovative DNA where we could give something different to the consumer that had a really good chance of growing significantly in the American consumer market. So those are decisions that you keep making as a founder or as a leader in any business. And there are multiple things that feed into that. The balance is doing it at the right time and doing it when you actually should do it so that you are
Yeah.
generating revenue as an ongoing concern and then your future revenue is strong based on these decisions.
Okay. Let me ask you a funny question.
Yeah.
Are you ever considering starting a franchise in Nigeria?
I haven't thought about it, no. Because there's so much work we're doing in that supply chain ecosystem that we talked about that is going to have me tied up, God willing, for the next 20, 30 years of my life. And it has direct impact on the communities we're working in Nigeria. It has a lot of potential to transform those specific communities in our own little way. And I'm dedicating my life to that. And it requires focus. So that's why I haven't really thought about those other things. My focus when it comes to how Iya Foods impacts Nigeria is very clear and it's very direct and it's very and it's firm. I want to say for the next decade, God willing. And that's in the supply
Fantastic.
chain. That's in the supply chain and the innovation, the product innovation and the supply chain. And there's a lot of opportunity there. We're great at it. So it's better to focus on that. So that's what we're focusing on.
Okay. I noticed on your Instagram handle,
Yeah.
you started another one apart from Iya Foods called Hue by Toyin. I like the name, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that all back of your personal need for another way of expressing you as an individual, or was this still part of the strategy for the business? You understand what I mean?
Okay, so Hugh by Toy is my personal Instagram, and that's something that is still evolving because I've focused more on Iya Foods, obviously. But those who know me as somebody who is a bit of an extrovert. I play, laughing, and all that kind of stuff. But outside of that, I'm actually very private. Very very private. I don't really go to events. I don't very rarely, and when I do, I maintain a low profile. Except I'm a speaker, or except there's a reason why I have to be highlighted. So, but I started to realize that I'm 44. I started to realize that my value to the world and
Your birthday
everybody,
tomorrow, right?
no, 18th. I started to realize
Okay.
that everybody has value, everybody has a personality, and everybody has a purpose. So I realized that my purpose in Air Foods is very clear. What I've been doing with Hugh by Toy is figuring out how to amplify that purpose in my personal Instagram. And Hugh by Toy means have you eaten? The H is have, the U is you, the E is eaten. And that's because that is my purpose in this world is if and I can explain very quickly what have you eaten means. A lot of Nigerian families, and I'm finding out that many families, even in America as well, every culture, when somebody asks you, have you eaten? That's a love language. You know, that I care about you. That is how was your day. That is, I care about how you thrive. So for me, my value to the world, making the world a better place, is going to come from food. So that's why I changed my Instagram profile from just Toyin Kolawole to Have You Eaten by Toyin. Because I'm thinking of how do I inject more positivity, more the social aspect of what we do, the social impact of what we do. And I'm housing that in what we're calling the Hugh by Toyin brand. So we're working on building that in a way that is not it doesn't compete with what we're trying to do with the foods, but it's more of a supporting role, so to speak, or an amplifier of what we're trying to do with the foods. But that's really what Toyi is me recognizing that as a human being, as a mom, how my own calling, my own purpose to make the world a better place is going to be through food. Food is my love language, so what's bringing people together. Because if you think about it, what is one of the few things that connects humanity is food. We all gotta eat. Once if you're
Yeah.
sharing a meal with somebody, it's difficult to hate that person, right?
Yeah.
Food is a humanizing aspect of humanity, for lack of a better phrase. And I've recognized that as my own purpose in this world. And that's why I came up with Hugh by Toy, which is Have You Eaten by Toy, to begin to figure out how I can just do more in terms of um, helping people to the best of my ability and making the world a better place. I believe in that kind of stuff. I really do.
Fantastic. That's really sweet. I noticed from your handle too, you have people, famous people like Gabriel Union, Tab, Murray, featuring your food on their Instagram handles, and I wanted to find out if um, did you have to do anything to get them to speak about it, or they've discovered your food, they liked it enough to want to talk about it?
That was an amazing opportunity that came from Amazon. Amazon works with a
Wow.
lot of these celebrities, and it goes back to when you start something, and people who can help you, people who can make connections, people who can do introductions, people who can amplify your voice. When those opportunities come, because you're being diligent at what you're doing, you're then able to plug into those opportunities. Those were very exciting days that when those things happened. So, and we do have something that in the works that is going to build upon all of the data and learning we got from all of that. So I'll be announcing that soon. I cannot wait to announce that. There's something freaking amazing that is coming out of that. So you see.
Yes, I'm on my last question now.
Yes.
So, My last question. So, what's your exit strategy? Do you see yourself passing on the baton to someone else? Do you think you will sell and start something else?
So
Yeah,
right now, and again, I know this can evolve. Right now, this is where my background as somebody who had a career in private equity comes in. In private equity, there are many ways you can exit. There are a few ways you can exit. Whether somebody's acquiring your business, and that has a range of things. Sometimes they acquire outright, or sometimes they acquire a part of the business, and you're still a part of the business. Or you can do an IPO. For me, as Toy, the Hue by Toy, the idea of an IPO just seems amazing, a Nigerian black woman, successful IPO. I know the power of representation, being an American
yeah,
and also being a Nigerian, also being a black woman, also being a mother to two black sons. I understand the power of representation, and all of us have a part to play. I know what it was like when the principal in my son's school was a black man. I know what it's like when we go to a doctor and there's somebody in the hospital and there's somebody who's black there. It's nice when there's a good balance, diversity in any
yeah,
representation, and it matters in every aspect of our lives. So for us to be able to do an IPO, and for me and Iya Foods to be able to contribute towards that representation in people's minds or what's possible in food CPG, particularly for an IPO, that would be a blessing. So to narrow down the answer, we're thinking of we're likely to be acquired or we'll do an IPO. Me personally, I would love to do an IPO. And that, of course, factors into the kind of decisions I'm making today for our growth strategy. But we'll see how that goes. I'm trusting God. I'm doing everything I should do, but I'm also trusting God.
fantastic. It's been so lovely having you, and I've learned so much. In fact, I'm going to have to listen to this myself about two or three more times. So, thank you so much for sparing the time. It's been splendid having you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Bumi. This was nice to see you again after so long. I'm going to send you a message and we can catch up a little bit later. But this was nice. Thank you.
Yes, let's keep in touch.